It'll start,
That
when
starts
the red
it, okay.
starts counting,
Okay.
then you
Well, I've been on vacation for a couple of weeks, went to Hawaii, laid on the beach, and it was very rewarding. Then I got off the pain medicine and realized I hadn't left Sedro Woolley. So, anyhow, I'm back. I got a new knee. If you got a bad knee, I recommend that you get a new one. They're way better. So, with that, welcome to the greatest Rotary Club in the universe. And Chris, do we have what are we doing first here? We have a prayer.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, we do. Good and gracious Lord, open our eyes to the need within our community. Open our ears to the voices of our community. And open our hearts to the need as we fulfill those obligations in supporting our community and being collaborators and partners with them in order to bring a better quality of life for us and all of them. Amen.
Okay, flag salute. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Four-way test.
Is the truth, is it fair to all concerned, will it build goodwill and better friendships, will it be beneficial to all concerned.
And Chris, you are in charge of our song.
Which is really scary.
So we're going to do something a little different. We're going to sing Oklahoma. We're going to do it 4-part harmony. We're going to start with the backward. Okay, it's not really, we got a baseball guys recording this week. Let's do Take Me Out to the Ball Game. Take me out to the ball game.
Take me out to the crowd, buy me some peanuts and cracker jacks. I don't care if I ever get back for it's root for the Mariners. If they don't win, it's a shame. Or it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game.
You know, is Bill McCann here? Hey, Bill, next time we sing that, you got to lead us because that was pretty slow. So, okay. All right. Do we have any visiting Rotarians here?
So we do have a visiting Rotarian.
Okay, and you're going to do your announcement right now too, okay? So introduce her.
Okay, so we have Suzanne from the Burlington Edison Club, and I think she has.
Hi, Suzanne.
She has a couple of students here who want to tell us about some of the projects they're doing.
Come on up. So this is the group that was supposed to be here last week. They knew I wasn't going to be here, so they didn't show up. So go ahead.
Hi, I'm Anna, and this is Malachi. And we both go to Burlington High School, and we're both juniors. And we just wanted to come and tell you guys about this program that we're a part of, which is called the YES program, which stands for Youth Engaged in Service. And a part of this program is 10 juniors this year. We'll be doing 80 hours of volunteer service in our community. And then in June, we will go to Honduras for 9 days and do several service projects there, such as painting a school and building playgrounds. And then we will come back and present to you guys what we learned there, what we did, and how it affected us. And so we're very thankful that you guys are sponsoring me to be able to go to Honduras this summer and being able to come here and talk to you about what it's going to be like when we come back. So thank you very much for having us.
So the real goal is in the future that we actually get some YES students from Sedro Woolley to do this, which would be really cool. And isn't that part of the deal here at some point? So it's a great program. These kids, we get them hooked into giving of their time and talent, and then we can basically patio for the next 50 years. So, do we have any guests of Rotarians here? We all good? Okay. So, starting with club business, we don't have any anniversaries today, so we're going to skip by anniversaries. And I need Mark Nielsen up here. Oh, you're right there. There you go. So, it's that time of year when we, pick the board members and the president-elect and all those different positions for Rotary going into the future. And this is probably the best day, well, Tuesday was the best day that I can think of being like the president of the greatest Rotary Club in the universe. Because when I went to training last year, I met a guy, this old guy, he's probably like 2 years older than me, but he looked old, from Oak Harbor, that had been president of the Oak Harbor Club 5 times. And I was thinking, and then we met some people from Alaska where some of them have been on the boards for 15 years. And I thought, man, does that really make sense? Well, now I know why you guys are the greatest Rotary Club. We had 10 people for 2 positions. 10 people said, yes, I will get on the board and I will help. And all 10 of them were better than most of the people that I met at those trainings. So that's the skill set of the people that we got here. So we had to make some tough decisions. And some of those tough decisions came down to my opinion, okay? All right? And we didn't vote on these people the way normal people would vote. We talked about them, and then I said, okay, this is the way it's going to be. Stephanie was there, and she said, Dad, you can't do it that way. But we pretty much did it that way. So
I was trying to be the voice of reason.
not happening. So Mark is going to tell you the 4 people that we, 1, 2, 3, 4, the 4 people that we have decided at the board level to push on, and then it's up to you guys that got to vote on today, right? Yeah. Okay, so Mark, go ahead.
So just to reiterate what Mike said quickly, I put together a list of names to call to see who might want to be on the board and or run for president-elect or be president-elect, thinking that, half of them at least would have some commitments or wouldn't be able to do it. But as I went down the line, as people got back to me, they all said yes, 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 yes. There's a long list of people that was not typical. Talk about the greatest Rotary Club in the universe, this is it. And so we've got names now for several years out in terms of who can be on the board, and there's others that may, between now and then, say, hey, I'd like to serve as well. So starting this in the next year, either on the board or as a director or on the foundation, will be Phil Brockman and
That's
Chris Johnston, who's here. Is Phil here? Chris is here, and Sheena Burns. So would you, let's give them a round of applause for doing that. And then our president-elect for next year will be Rich Wyrick. I have to say I was surprised when I went down to the list that Rich had never been president. Because he's been involved in this club for a long time. So anyway.
right. And what I've learned being president, just because you're president doesn't mean that you get off any of the committees you're on. And Rich is going to find that out because he stepped back in and is helping with the live auction this year. And if it wasn't for people like Rich and some of the other people here, we would be in trouble. So with that, we have to have we got to close the nominations. We have to vote. Or no, we have to close nominations, and we have to nominate them, and then we have to have a second, and then we got to vote. So, Doug, you want to do all that in one little step like that?
Stephanie agreed to do it.
Okay, Stephanie?
I so move to nominate,
We got to close nominations
oh,
first.
I move to close nominations.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay, then I move to nominate Chris Johnston, Sheena Burns, and Phil Brockman as director positions, and Rich Wyrick as president-elect for next year.
Okay, and it's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
There you go. This is how a Democrat.
Yeah, we're talking about elections.
Yeah. So, we have the speakers today might take offense to the way we just did this, but this is Rotary, not America. So, okay, now we have a few more announcements. Tim, you have an announcement on.
Okay, talking about the auction, number one, we have our cruise sign-up raffle right here, $20 for each square, so sign up often and be sure to pay your money. Rich generally takes care of this, I can also take money, and we can do this, so please get your $20 out, get your name on there, and let's get this filled up. Number two, sponsors. David isn't here right now, but he wants to get the invitations ready, and he'd like to have all the sponsors signed up by the end of next week. So if you know anybody that's interested in being a sponsor, or if there's somebody you're going to talk to about being a sponsor, get out there and get after that so we can get all the sponsors signed up and make sure that they're in the invitations and the program and get the credit they deserve for helping us out.
Chris.
Live auction items, Rich, did you want to say anything about that?
We need to.
I'll second that. Yes, we do need the live auction items, all of the different monthly groups. So get to work on that and get those in to Rich or myself or Bruce Berkeley. You can send it to any one of us. And if you need any help with anything, any questions on that, be sure to call one of the three of us, or Danny can help you out with that too. So we'll get as many live auction items as we can. That's where we're making a ton of money. And then the silent auction. We've got Rick first.
Okay, it's that time, so I'm not gonna jump on those members that know the routine about the slips. This is for the new member. This is the new member talk for the slips. The slip is in triplicate. White, yellow, and pink. Oh, okay, thanks, Adam. It's been revised a little bit. There's a place in the upper right-hand corner for the date. We've expanded a little bit for descriptions, so you can go into detail if you want. We've made, on the bottom line, if there are restrictions as far as dates or certificates or things like that, deadlines or something, make note of that. As we all know that when you complete a form, whether you're in the presence of a donor or not, tear off the pink slip, give it to the donor if you can. It's got the club's tax ID number so they can use it for their tax write-offs. Always, and I would repeat, always turn in the white and yellow slip together. Even though you might not be turning in the item at that time, when they get cataloged with a number, they need to be on both of those slips. So never separate the yellow and the white. Turn them in to me or Travis or any of the collection team, and we'll all be good. There are technically, I guess, 2 collection sites where we will receive, well, 3. You talk about that? Sure. Okay. So, there's.
All right, so just
carrying on a little bit, we've always in the past brought items to Lemley Chapel. You can still do that. But we're also trying to transition to the logging office. So if you want to bring your items to the logging office, you just got to make sure you talk to Erin Cleaner. And I'm going to go talk to her to make sure she knows you're going to come talk to her. So Rick said, turn in your slips to anybody on the collection committee. I am going to be here starting the first week of March, with one of my staff members. We're going to be on the table over here. You guys bring your items into the Rotary meeting. You can turn it into us. We'll log it right then. If you bring your item to the Rotary meeting, I can collect it from you and I can get it over to the logging office. So if that's the easiest, do that. Otherwise, you can get it to the logging office yourself, and that's fine.
Okay, are there any questions so far? Oh, our next auction meeting will be March 4th, the 4th of March. That's a Wednesday. And we will be meeting at the school district office. I have not confirmed that with the office, but I'll have time to do that. So we'll get that set up, but figure on March 4th over at the school district office on Trail Road. Any questions? Okay.
Hey, take that to Carl, because Carl's going to announce the dates, because I forgot what they were, Carl, of the trainings. And what's that other thing where you get the grants?
I'll announce that in a minute when I figure out what it is you're asking me and I find the calendar. So whoever's next, let's go to the next. I'll try back again.
I think you are at the last one.
Okay.
Oh, no, you got another.
While I have the mic, we're working on several international projects. There's a recognized computer deal in Kenya. So we're going to get computers to kids in Kenya. At least we're working on that. We have another project in Burkina Faso to drill 20 wells. And we're trying to get 100,000 US and then turn that into 350,000. I believe is the budget for that, or maybe it's 100, I don't know. It's a lot of money. 20 wells, that's a really great project. And Burkina Faso is in real political strife right now, so we're evaluating all of that. We probably won't be visiting there, but there's people in country and they're very familiar with it. And we're working with Davey Yago. He visited this club in 2010 or something. And so we have a trusted partner in him, so that's kind of cool. And then he is working on projects in Honduras, and we have another one, I can't remember. Guatemala. Yeah, so we've got things going. It's really exciting, and we're spending all of the 10% that we earmark for international, which is great.
Okay,
All right, also on the auction, 2 weeks from today, the first program in March, we're going to have an auction 101 discussion. Throughout time, there's a lot of things that work and some things that don't work on the auction, and so we wanted to have an opportunity, especially for newer members, to have some folks get up and talk a little bit about things like what are our responsibilities as Rotarians. There's a lot of ways to help make this auction happen. It only happens once, right? That's one of the benefits of our club, is we get to work on this one time a year and spend the money the rest of the year. So, how to make a great auction item. Not all auction items return as much benefit to the club as others, so just some tips on how to put together great auction items and a bunch of other things. So, trying to get here will be 2 weeks from today, especially the newer auction or the newer Rotarians. It's going to be a great meeting. We'll hear some really good stuff.
Okay. Sorry for throwing you under the bus, Carl, but it was either you or me.
I got it.
Right, there's several district activities coming up that I'll just go through. We have a grant seminar that is March 1st, right? We have to send 2 people to that. The 29th? Okay, that's the 29th. It's really important that someone decides Mike, George, or Joe. Is there anybody committed to going to that?
Sarah,
Okay,
I'll check with
I think we've already checked with her, and I think she already declined. You wanna go? You can save the day for us. If we don't go, we can't write the grant to drill 20 wells in Burkina Faso. That's how important it is, okay? There's the Rotary District Assembly coming up. That's around April 1st. There's a calendar that's going slow. There's Rotary Leadership Training, that's another one. That is the 7th of March. That's local. If that's interesting to you, if you want to learn more about Rotary.
That's in Mount Vernon.
In Mount Vernon, I highly recommend you go to that.
And Stephanie, you think you guys are gonna go maybe?
I registered.
All right, great. So we got some people going to that. So that's different than the district assembly. The district assembly, I think, is around April 1st, and this is going too slow to figure that out, but that's like Rotary 101. If you're a new board member, or if you're going to be a new board member, it'd be great to go. If you're thinking about being on the board, it'd be great to go, because it's all things Rotary. And then we have a lot of other things, but those are the two important ones.
Okay, so the big thing is that we got somebody to step up and go to the grant seminar. Congratulations. And we're gonna get some people trained, because what I learned in the first 25 years of Rotary was that Sedro Woolley's pretty cool. In the last 2 years, I've learned that there's some pretty cool people outside of Sedro Woolley and Rotary. So, you know, you guys probably don't have to wait 25 years to know that. I mean, if I listened to Brock Stiles, he would have told me that 15 years ago, like, you know, there's some other people in the world other than Sedro Woolley. And I may or may not have believed him, but at least he could have told me that. So, anyhow, it's worth doing if you got time. And I think it's important that we do these things to broaden our horizon. Any other announcements before we go to the wheel? Do we have Phil, you're in charge there. You take over.
I've already got a phone, man. And yes, Brock did tell you 15 years ago, you just don't remember.
David, and they're going to tell us what they've done to protect us from the Russians.
Hi folks, I'm Sandy Perkins, I'm the Skagit County Auditor. I had no idea I had been invited to the world's, the best Rotary Club in the universe. I'm honored, thank you so much. I'm here today with David Cunningham. He is my Chief Deputy Auditor, and he's our Election Supervisor. And David's going to tell you all about the March 10th presidential primary. It's kind of a different animal. It only happens once every 4 years, and it's unlike any other elections that we hold. So there are some unique things you'll need to know. But I just want to talk real quickly about some things that we find in all of our other elections. Every election, we end up with hundreds of ballots that cannot be counted. And they're such simple fixes. Last week's, or February 11th, special election was for schools and for the Anacortes sales tax initiative. There were 313 ballots that we could not count. And that was 113 ballots where the signatures on the return envelope did not match what we have in our voter registration system. We send a letter to each of those voters, and we also follow up with a phone call to the voters and ask them to come in and re-sign the voter registration system to update it so we can match their signature. But 113 people didn't respond, and those votes were not counted. There were 110 ballots that were returned and the envelopes were not signed. We cannot count those. And there were 85 ballots that were mailed late that could not be counted. So remember, if you have your ballot in your hand on election day, do not put it in a post office mailbox, because it will go to Seattle first to be stamped, to be postmarked, and then come back to Mount Vernon, and it will be late. So if you have your ballot in your hand on election day, please put it in a ballot drop box before 8 p.m. So 313 ballots could not be counted on February 11th. And on the last general election on November 5th of 2019, we had 604 ballots that could not be counted for these same reasons. The signatures did not match the voter registration system. Again, all these folks are contacted, but they did not, 194 of them did not come in and fix their signature. There were 238 ballots returned, and the envelopes were not signed. And there were 169 ballots postmarked late. So these are really simple fixes. Yes, sir.
What's that as a percentage? I mean, how many total ballots did you get?
It's a small percentage. It's a very small percentage, but some of these races are very close and could really make a difference. So I just want to encourage you to make sure your return envelope is signed, that your ballot is postmarked. Here's one other thing I should say. If you take your ballot into a post office on election day, ask them to hand stamp, and then it won't have to go to Seattle, and it'll be counted if they hand stamp it. Anyhow, I'm rambling. I want to introduce David Cunningham. He is just a wealth of knowledge about elections. He's been in the auditor's office for 25 years. He's been the election supervisor for probably, what?
Couple hundred.
More than 15 years, I think. So David's going to explain the presidential primary, which is March 10th.
So depending on time, I'll answer other questions too if we have time, but you gotta let me know about that. So this upcoming election, March 10th, is what's called the Washington State Presidential Primary Election. Its purpose is to allocate delegates at the two-party conventions, the Republicans and the Democrats, who will then be sent to the national convention of each party. And it's at the national convention that each candidate each party, arrives at their final candidate. So is that basic idea clear? Every state sends its nominees, its party nominees, to the national convention. And it's at the national convention that the party choices are made. So who's going to run for president, vice president, etc. So you have to understand that basic context for the rest of this conversation to make any sense. what we're doing on March 10th is Washington State is doing its version of that. You've heard about all these other states have already been in the news for the conventions. Last was Nevada, and I don't know who's coming up next, but there's, I think, Super Tuesday is coming soon. And we're like a week after that, something like that. So this is the process by which Washington State voters get to participate in the national level decision for each of the two major parties.
David, are those delegates obligated to vote the same way that, I'm going with this, so the same way as the voters tell them?
Great question, because the answer for the first time is yes. Either 4 or 8 years, I can't remember which, ago, the Republican Party said it would allocate part of its delegates, excuse me, according to what the popular vote was in this election. And some it was going to be a caucus decision. 4 years ago, the Republicans said, we're going to just do the whole thing according to the popular vote. The Democrats had not by that point in time made the same commitment. This year, for the first time, they are. So both parties, for the first time, will allocate their delegates to the national convention using the percentages as reflected by how people vote in this election. Okay?
Shall I pass these out?
Yeah,
You
sure,
wanna talk
please.
about and so forth?
Okay, so Sandy's going to be handing out some flyers that are going to describe some very basic ideas. One of which is that when you get this ballot, and some of you may have already received it, I think they started arriving in the mail yesterday. When you get your ballot, you take it out of the envelope in which you received it. You got the normal ballot packet, which has got your ballot, a secrecy sleeve, a return envelope, some instructions. The return envelope for this election, unlike every other election in Washington State, is going to have a part on the outside of the envelope. You remember, you have to sign your envelope when you return your ballot because we check the signature on the envelope against the signature we have on file for you. So there's one thing. If you haven't updated your signature in a long time and it's changed, please come in and get us a new signature. Because we check however you sign your envelope now against what we got in the database, and if the two are decades apart, people's signatures change a lot. So anyway, so you always have to sign that when you return a ballot. This time, there's going to be an additional step. And that additional step is that there's a comment on the envelope that reads, as you see on that piece of paper. That Sandy just handed out each desk. For this election only, you must mark and sign a party declaration for your vote to count. Major political parties require voters to mark a party box. And then you can go on and read the rest of it. Yeah.
Why are the party declarations different on that?
They were created by each of the two parties. So each has to say in what that word is. Yes?
If it's a party election, do the parties pay for it? Why not?
Wow. We will build the state as each county elections department builds the jurisdictions for which it conducts the elections, and when it's a county election, the county eats it. We, though, in cases like this, get to build the state. I'm not sure what the state does with respect to the parties. I don't think they pass this bill on. Secretary of State has a budget for elections, and I think for this year they budgeted, yes.
So, if there's two parties, there's like the Green Party and all the rest of the parties, if the taxpayers paying for those, how come they're not on there?
This election is designed for what's defined in law as a major political party. A major political party is defined in the law as as a party which had a candidate in the last presidential election receive at least 5% of the popular vote in our state. We had only 2 parties who met that criteria. And every time we have one of these elections, it refers back to the previous presidential for that. Yes?
Since they're the 2 major parties and people sign a party affiliation, what's to stop people from crossover voting?
It's a great question, and it opens up a whole field of related questions. So I'm going to sort of take your question and segue from that into other things as well. Could you all hear the question?
No.
Pardon me. So the question was, what's to keep a person from marking R and voting D on the ballot, right? That's essentially it.
No.
Yeah.
Being an R and voting D.
Yeah. Okay. So
Saying they're D.
now I need to back up even further. So you said being an R and voting a D, right?
Yeah.
Can anybody tell me what it means to be an R, be a Republican, or be a Democrat in Washington State?
Nothing.
Who said that? Gold star. This is true. You can join a party by going to the party and filling out whatever membership requirement is for them. But for us, for we who conduct the elections, 99% of the time, it means nothing. Washington state voters are not required to declare a party affiliation when they register. We in the elections department, including the Secretary of State, keep no record in any of our data, with the one exception I'm about to name, and it's about this election, of anybody's party affiliation. So as far as Skagit County elections is concerned, as far as the Secretary of State's office is concerned, if you're a registered voter in Washington, you're a registered voter in Washington. You are not an R or a D registered in Washington because we don't track that. You have to meet the registration requirements. If you do and you register, you're a registered voter, but you do not have to, from our perspective, have an affiliation with either major party or with any party. So this is kind of contrary to how a lot of people think, and Washington is unusual in this regard. We happen to think it's a nice way of doing things. So, circling back, I sometimes can wander, so don't hesitate to bring me back. So for the purposes of this election, which is contrary to every other election we have, what you have to do is on the envelope that you're returning the ballot to us in, check I'm an R or I'm a D and sign. And what happens from that point on is that one of the first things we do when we receive ballots, we segregate them into piles of R's and D's. With me so far? Then we open those. So we have multiple piles of Democratic ballots and Republican ballots. The first thing that's been done before they've even been removed from the envelope is segregated by that affiliation that the voter has chosen to make on the return envelope. Then we open the envelopes and take out the ballots. So from the beginning of our processing process, we are segregating according to the declaration on the envelope. From that point on, you've got piles of R's and piles of D's, and that means if anybody checked R but voted D, their ballot will be in one of the piles of R ballots. But they'll have a D they will be in that pile of D's. Does this make sense so far?
Well, and it will not be counted.
And it won't be counted.
So R's have one choice.
Yes. But
These have,
Yeah, in this case, yeah.
you have to mark the same part.
And you won't know who that person was because they're separated from the other.
Exactly correct, and that's why we do it that way, because the secrecy of your vote is something, foundational to the vote really in this country. So that's why we do that step first. So that's why each of you as voters, remember, you are not signing up to be a Republican or a Democrat by the mark you put on that envelope. You are not enrolling as an RID, you are not registering as an RID or anything else. You're just saying, for the purpose of this election only, this is how I'm choosing to vote. I'm choosing to affiliate with this party in order to cast this vote. Secretary of State keeps a record of that for 60 days, during which time entities like, say, the major political parties can buy those lists to use them for fundraising. But after 60 days, the lists are stricken and we can no longer access them.
but they already got
Anybody who buys them has it. Yes.
If someone votes in this election, are they precluded from participating in a non-major convention down the road?
No. Well, let me back up a little. Convention participation is an activity that is defined by those organizations. So you would have to contact your organization to find out. They may have internal rules, it's not in the law. Yes?
Our news loves to talk about voter suppression, cheating in the system, all this stuff. What is your take on how hard is it to cheat in the system for the, like, say, if you were corrupt and you really wanted a political party to go one way, what would prevent you, per se, from cheating in the system? Or what are your checks and balances that are in place for this?
It's a great question. Its answer is complex and not one simple thing. We have all sorts of controls in place, whether it goes to control of the actual physical ballot, who has access to that, who has access to the computer systems that do the processing, that create the ballots, that track which went out, which came back, all that kind of stuff. There's a very small group of people in our county, for example, about 5 or 6 of us, who have access to that equipment, to the rooms where the ballots are stored, et cetera, et cetera. We have, you may have heard the expression air-gapped. It means a computer system that is not connected to anything else. Our ballot tabulation system is air-gapped. It has no connection to the internet, either internally in the county or externally. It goes on and on. So,
Yeah, one follow-up to that is, I always find it suspicious when lots of, several dozen or 100 ballots are found after the date. Has that ever happened in our county, where we've lost track of ballots?
not that I'm aware of, and as Sandy said, I've been around, I think, 26 years now, almost. But I do know at least one instance that you might be referring to in King back in '04, and yeah, that was not good. And you probably know as well as I do the stories that went around back then about what occurred. So they subsequently spent a lot of money to redo how they handle things, built a new building. Yes?
About how much time does it take to determine that the ballot is invalid?
How much time does it take? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, you open the ballot, and then you gotta look at it to see if it's a valid or invalid ballot.
Before we open it, the first defining characteristics are, was it signed? If it wasn't signed, it goes no further. So if it's not signed, the first thing we do is we segregate all those, and as Sandy mentioned, we get a fair number of those. We segregate them, we call the voter, and we send them a letter, both. And then if we don't hear back from them, we'll do a follow-up. So that's the first thing. Next thing is we check the signature. If it's signed, we check to see, and we do this for every ballot we get back. Every single one. We check the signature on the outer envelope and verify that it is, in fact, who we sent it to. And we do that from your signatures that you either gave when you signed your registration form, or maybe you signed into DOL and signed their stuff. Again, if you haven't updated your signature in a long time, I really recommend you do it. I did mine recently because it had been 30 years or whatever it had been, and my signature has changed. So I recommend you do that. But everybody who looks at signatures in the elections department has been trained. So they're all certified by, State Patrol. They do signature training, we get that.
What's it take if I wanted to go look at my signature? Do I just go to the courthouse and burn it?
Yeah.
And they say, this is your signature,
Yeah.
do you want to keep it or change it?
Yeah, if you just walk in and ask us, we'll print you a copy of what we've got, and if you look at it and you go, ooh.
Because I think mine's from like when I was 18.
Yeah, and a lot of people it's the same for. And so, yeah, for exactly that reason, we do recommend you do that check. It's a good thing. Because, I've signed tens of thousands of things since I was 18, and it does not look like that careful cursive that the teacher taught me. It's more like, yeah.
So does every county do the signature check like we do?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Well, so if you voted by mail and didn't get a call about your signature, then it's still adequate, is that correct?
Yes.
So there's no good reason to go check it unless you've heard something.
You can make that argument. Like for me, when I changed last year or whenever it was, I looked at it and I couldn't figure out, but I still recognize at the same time, in the office, I might sign 20 or 50 things, a day or a week or whatever. And when I'm doing that, I'm a lot less careful. So, if you take the time to actually be careful, but that's not the way most people sign things in a day-to-day kind of setting. Yes?
What I was curious about was how long did it take in the process of determining if the ballot's invalid if they didn't vote along their party line?
That's pretty much immediate. It's one of the first checks we do. So remember, we segregate first, right, by the choice indicated on the return envelope. Then the ballots are removed from those envelopes. The envelopes go one direction, the ballots go another. And we do multiple checks before we actually start the process of scanning and counting the ballots. And one of the very first things in this election is, this is supposed to be a pile of D's, are there any R's in it? And if they are, we're segregated out.
Is that a visual thing by a person?
Yes.
Well, I was going to ask you what triggers a recount, and does the recount look any different from what you described?
Recount is defined by legal parameters, so there can be a voluntary recount, which means that it has been requested by a candidate or a group sponsoring the ballot. There's also a legal mandatory minimum if the difference between two sides on an issue, say two candidates, falls under a certain amount, it's required by the law that we recount.
Looks the same as your other count?
Yeah.
You don't change the way you count?
No.
Okay? All right, you guys. So first of all, look at this. So he stayed on time. I don't even know he'd do that with a phone, but he did it. So Santa, come up here. When you're checking those off, on those lists. We have two pins for you, and these are from the world's greatest,
I will treasure.
universe.
Best in the universe.
Best Rotary Club in the universe. I've only got like 2 more months to get that perfect. And thank you guys very much, because I think it's important that we all vote and we actually have our ballots count.
Yes.
So with that,
Mike just reminded me, I wanted to add one little quickie, and hopefully to inspire you to vote. Skagit County, over the time basically that I've been involved with elections, participates very highly in the presidential election. Over the more than 2 decades I've been affiliated with this, we are more often than not in the 80%. 3 presidential elections ago, about 87% of Skagit County voters participated. 2 ago, it was 82 or 3%. Last time around, it was just under 80%. Those numbers are unheard of for most American jurisdictions. So you can be very proud of Skagit County, and I encourage you to encourage everybody else to vote.
okay, thank you. And with that, we are adjourned.